Before we begin, two messages. Here's a riddle. How do you build native cross-platform mobile applications quickly without having to rewrite code and hire consultants at a huge cost? Titanium from Appcelerator. Called the easy button for mobile application development, it allows you to focus more on what's important, getting product out the door. Join the more than 1.5 million active developers who have created over 13,000 apps at www.appcelerator.com. When my company needed to develop a key mobile product, one that I was counting on as a new source of revenue, I knew exactly who to turn to. Macadamian. They delivered on time with incredible attention to detail, and I was able to get product into customers' hands faster than I ever thought possible. I've personally known them for 10 years, and they do make great products even better. Check them out at www.macadamian.com. Hello everybody, welcome to Untether.tv. My name is Rob Woodbridge. I am your host, and this is where we have casual conversations with mobile rock stars, and sometimes they're not so casual, but if you hear the sounds coming through your speakers or over your headset, you'll know quite frankly that this is very casual, because I'm here with Jyri Engeström, who is the co-founder of a site called, of a company called Ditto, and he is seemingly on his back porch, or the back porch of the company, or the it's a sunny day in Northern California in San Francisco. Jyri, thank you for coming on to Untether and sharing this story with us.
Pleasure to be on, Rob.
Well, Ditto has been called a number of things, and I'm going to get you to explain it in your own words in a second, but if I just take these two quotes, one from TechCrunch, which calls it an iPhone app in the location space that goes beyond the check-in, which... if you've ever heard, if anybody of you have listened to any of the other sessions I've done, I've been craving for something to go beyond the check-in. Check-in is not the end of the line. So, and then GigOhm, good friends over GigOhm, says that Ditto is part of a larger shift in the location game as startups look to help users figure out where to go with personalized recommendations. So a recommendation engine. So I love this. Beyond the check-in, recommendations, where should I go? Predictive, preemptive. Jyri, fill in the blanks. What does Ditto do?
Sure, Rob. So for those of you who have an iPhone, Ditto is available in the App Store, so you feel free to check it out yourself. Sites over at ditto.me, Ditto.me. And so I'm actually, like one could say, a second-time entrepreneur. So my previous company was called Jaiku, which was, for those of you who were active online at the time might remember, sort of like very similar to Twitter, and we were acquired by Google back in 2007, and then I worked at Google for a few years, and after I left Google, founded Ditto, and the idea for Ditto really emerged out of what I saw happening with Jaiku, and then later at Google. Basically, search, or discovery as I'd like to prefer to call it, is clearly going social. And social, on the other hand, is going mobile. So it seemed logical, if one was to kind of address this question of how do people discover new things, to start in a social way, to start with these devices and what you could build for a phone. And that's really where Ditto kind of comes in, because on Ditto, you tap to announce your intent to do things. So let me see if I can actually get this UI to show here.
It looks good.
So this is kind of four squares in the sense that you have a range of these activities that you can announce that you're doing. For instance, let's say let's assume that you want to do coffee, and what you can do then is you can either define, let's say that you're heading out to a particular coffee shop nearby. You can just notice I'm doing everything by tapping here. I'm not needing to type anything, so it's going to optimize for the touchscreen. So what I'll do is I can, tell people, oh, I'm heading over to, for instance, here's the coffee shops next door here, and in fact, a couple of those have been favorited by a bunch of my friends. So this is a way of kind of quickly getting social suggestions, recommendations about what's happening nearby. And it might be that I choose one of them, but actually an easier way is just to say, I haven't decided where I'm going yet. And just tap send without having to type anything. And then this message now gets pushed out to all my friends around me. So again, very easy way to announce your intent to do something. And what we're doing here is then allowing people to respond to that message by saying something like, I'm just going to reply to it myself here to show this quickly, where I can now reply to my friends by giving them a recommendation. I'm just going to recommend something back to myself here to make it quicker. I'm not even going to bother typing anything again, and saying Blue Bottle Coffee Kiosk, which is actually, by the way, if you're ever visiting San Francisco, Rob, an excellent place to get a cappuccino or an espresso. So here you see how, I was able to just do something quite meaningful, give somebody a recommendation back ad hoc without having to type anything. And this is where I believe this is going. So here, actually, I'll show you another thread that seems to be just there. Something that happened where a friend of mine, Trevor Cornwall, over in Palo Alto, where I used to live, said he was heading out with his kids and he was going to buy some shoes. And I happen to have lived in Palo Alto, so I knew a great kids' shoe store. And I was able to tell him, well, good stuff in Howard Shoes, go check it out. And he actually went in and he seems to have bought something there. And he's also given me, notice this little trophy here, it says thanks.
Yep.
And that's a way on Ditto to give users what I guess could be called karma for the geeks out there who remember things like, all these karma systems, or seller rating. It's a kind of way to, show credibility. So if you get a recommendation from a friend, you know who they are. But if you look at the public stream of activities, you can also respond to complete strangers who may have chosen to post something publicly. Because it could be, I don't know, frankly, if I visit Ottawa, you'd be my only friend in Ottawa, Rob. And it could be that you don't happen to be online when I'm looking for a coffee shop, so I post it publicly and hope that somebody nearby who knows the neighborhood could respond to me even if I don't know who they are. So this is a way, on Ditto, we're trying to generalize this across what I call all social objects. So not just coffee shops, not just locations, but also doing it for other things. For instance, you can do this on Ditto for movies. So we have, again, I'm trying to show this UI here. I apologize if it's not really showing, but here I'm saying, and I'm actually planning to see a movie later tonight, and I haven't decided when I'm going to see it. But what I'm doing now is I'm checking what's playing nearby me tonight. We're actually using the same database that, for instance, if you use Google Movies, and you can see what's playing nearby me tonight. And again, using the same logic here, I could choose to say, well, I want to go see Hannah, which is actually unfinished, so it opens up without, I've seen the trailer online, and it opens up with a plot about, this kid living in the backwoods in Finland. So I'm thinking I might go see that. But for instance, I'll tell you a story. What happened last week was I said I was going to go see Source Code, another movie. And then somebody actually replied to me and said, oh, don't go see Source Code. I just saw it and it sucked. And then someone else said, you should go and see this other movie, Win-Win, instead. And I actually ended up altering my decision based on this conversation. So I believe in the power of combining both this future-oriented announcing your intent together with algorithmic recommendations as well as these real-time recommendations coming from your social network. Because I believe that what you end up with is something that's an extremely useful way for people to not just check in, which typically happens when you're already somewhere. Even if you get pushed a deal about something that's happening across the street, what are your chances of getting up at that point and walking across the street? Are fairly low.
So
but when you do it before people are actually there, or before they've actually, gone to see the movie, even if they think they know what they want, their friends still get an opportunity to, give them back advice. So it's about helping people help each other, which I think really is, at the core of the, the power of the social web.
So when you talk about this, I mean, it's such a, I think the biggest buzz that we hear around the terms that we're hearing now are recommendation engines. There's a lot of companies that are saying, listen, even Foursquare is getting into the space. Certainly Facebook is, where you've got your social graph, you know, everybody's got a term for these things. You got your social graph that you know, you put it out to it, and you wait for them to respond, or you know, if they've favorited a place, then it has a little bit more weight. And when you're looking for a place to go and either have a cup of coffee or dinner or go see a movie, that's what happens. But I still see people out there on Twitter saying, hey, do I go see Hannah, or do I go see, you know, whatever, the source code, or do I go see, you know, Fast and Furious? And then they get a flurry of activity, and then they still have to make their decision based on who they trust, and ultimately it's not very effective. This is absolutely that intersection where social and real life happen, but it's very much about stepping out as opposed to stepping in. So stepping out of your house and going someplace as opposed to stepping into some place and telling people you're there.
Right. That's actually a great way of putting it, Rob. I really like that. I think one of the things that I noticed about Twitter early on is actually something that goes back to the early days when Jaiku and Twitter were just getting started. Was Twitter has a slightly different approach to conversations, because as you know, you tweet something out. Twitter's kind of optimized for a broadcast communication or a hub and spokes model. So, you know, Rob Woodbridge tweets out to his thousands and thousands of followers. I don't know, are they millions now or thousands? But
dozens, yeah.
Dozens.
Yeah.
And what happens is, you know, I, as somebody who follows you, Rob, that can then, you know, reply you back. And you hear, you know, we can have a conversation. The problem, however, is that, you know, my friend, who might also be following you, doesn't necessarily see my reply because they may not be following me. So it's optimized for this two-way communication. But what you really want, I think, is you want to have groups who are all able to have the peripheral vision to see each other.
And you started to see that there's a you know, a crop of companies that have grown up now, like Yobongo, who are kind of group chatting or group texting companies, but they're all fleeting. You're in and out, and ultimately they all have to be online, and it's in real time. Tell me, like, why start this when there's so much going out there? What was the crowning moment for you? So you went through the experience with Jaiku. You built that. You sold that to Google. Some people that I've spoken to or that I follow very closely have said that, you know, Jaiku was a much better platform than Twitter is. But you sold to Google, and then, I mean, what was it that you saw out there that decided, listen, you know, Ditto is what we've got to do here. This kind of engine.
Yeah, I think for me it was really about, you know, some of my personal experiences using these systems, right? It turned out the most useful aspect of a Jaiku, a Twitter, personally for me was this, you know, being able to tweet something, to post Jaiku about something. For instance, I remember very vividly on Jaiku having a number of conversations that then led to good friendships where I would say, oh, I was in Monaco for the first time in my life, and I'm posting, you know, I'm heading out to eat, and then somebody saying, oh, you should try out this place, you know, and then, or somebody actually ended up saying, oh, I'm here too, why don't we get together? And, you know, this is it was a great way to connect with people. When we got our, you know, when my first kid was born, I remember going out to the shopping mall, and, you know, it was getting kind of cold in Finland. Winter was coming, and we didn't have any warm clothes for the baby, and I'm like, that's just it. Baby's gonna freeze. Like, where do I get these clothes? So I, you know, and finding only these, you know, pink and pale blue, kind of like sickeningly, you know, candy-ish is baby clothes, and sort of in frustration after a couple of hours of trying to find any, you know, decent punk rock style baby clothes, posting on Jaiku, you know, this sucks. Like, aren't there any punk rock baby clothes, any like skulls, anything like that, you know, pirate baby clothes maybe, and getting back a response of, you know, from people, and then that becoming a conversation about something completely different, you know, about the, you know, design for babies, you know. Yep. So you post something out there that can just trigger a conversation that actually becomes very enriching, and what it's doing it's not only directing you to make, you know, decisions, in many cases purchase decisions, it's also connecting, you know, allowing you to form a deeper connection with these people, because it's like, you know, if you, Rob, recommend back a coffee shop to me that I haven't tried before in Ottawa or wherever, even in San Francisco, and I go there and I love it, I'm going to think, you know, that much more highly of you, you're going to become an interesting person to me. I'm trained as a sociologist, so these are the kinds of things that I think about. It's like, in social networks, it's all about, the relationships between people. And frankly, when I was working at a place like Google, which is extremely knowledgeable, and I would say probably the smartest people in the world, like just in terms of raw intelligence, intelligence doesn't always come with social intelligence, as I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So this is the social intelligence part of this, is how do you form systems that are not necessarily even actually, in terms of their raw, computing power, their prediction power, their algorithms, so smart, but are smartly designed so that they allow that enriching interaction. For instance, in this thread here, it turned out that we can build a wonderful prediction engine to let Trevor Cornwell know that Howard Shoes is probably a great place to buy children's shoes. But the fact that he got that recommendation from me made it that much more meaningful for him and for me. And now we have something to talk about the next time we meet. I can say, how did you find those shoes, man? How are your kids? Are your kids liking them or not? So this is the part that I think we can't. It kind of gets thrown out with the that's the baby with the bathwater if we focus too much on just the kind of raw prediction intelligence of systems.
Well, that's funny. I mean, it was part of my questioning, obviously, but if you look at something like Facebook, and if Facebook got into this game, what would be wrong with Facebook's approach to the way that this system operates? Like, Facebook could do it based on your social graph, but is that the right way or is that the wrong way?
Well, we're actually bootstrapping off of Facebook's social graph, and so when you sign in, you get to choose which ones of your Facebook friends you want to connect with on Ditto, as well as obviously Twitter, Foursquare, your phone book on your phone, which, by the way, is an interesting, I think, still fairly underutilized social graph.
Absolutely,
kind of mother of all social graphs anyway. Now, the challenge, I think, there's actually an interesting quote that Fred Wilson, a well-known venture capitalist, actually one of the investors in Twitter, recently said on a blog post where he said, well, typically in the life cycle of large successful companies, technologies, at some point a new technology arrives on the scene that is not initially recognized as such, but in hindsight turns out to be disruptive to the incumbent. And the question is, what might that be for Facebook? For Google, for instance, it was arguably the rise of the social web. It's becoming increasingly disruptive to Google's business because people are spending most of their time, on places like Facebook instead of Google. But what could it be for Facebook? And his answer was he thought it would be social, or it's not social, mobile. Yeah, mobile, because Facebook was founded before mobile was really the fundamental, the primary UI. And I just heard some incredible numbers about the Google Android phone activations. They're doing like over 350,000 activations a day, I believe. Yeah. And you think about that and you realize that, oh my God, it won't be more than a few years when, these become really the primary. Like, obviously we've been talking about this, but, in reality, the primary way for people to access these services. And that just creates a different kind of world to a Facebook, which is really still, you look at the Facebook app, and it's about, there's huge pressure for them to integrate all the different features of the Facebook website to the mobile app. And the mobile app is becoming more and more complex. Whereas if you think about the way mobile design should work, you think about somebody, why is Apple so successful with its products? It's because this damn thing has only one button, right? So it's about simplifying, not making things more complex. Yep. And this is one of the reasons why I think Fred Wilson is right. And the opportunity right now is to come up with something that's kind of purpose-built for an enriching and meaningful social interaction that is yet so simple that you don't need to really think it. You just tap away and you do it as you're going along.
Right, and that makes absolute sense. I mean, when you start to talk about discovering new things and discovering people, you certainly want to leverage the people that you know, but you also want to leverage the city and the people in that city who know best, right? So, if you don't know anybody in Ottawa, or I don't know anybody in San Francisco that's in my social graph on Facebook, then it's a dead end for me, right? So you want to be able to expand that a little bit more. So how important is UI design in this experience, especially with Ditto? I mean, you talk about tapping as opposed to typing, right? Which, and I think that's a general consensus in mobile, is that it has to be simple because you're either one-handing it or, you know, singular task. Do you guys feel the same way when you set out to build Ditto?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key, you know. And if you look at Foursquare, for instance, you know, Foursquare's innovation really was the check-in.
Yeah.
And why did the check-in take off so rapidly? When anybody who's known Dennis Crowley, the founder of Foursquare, you know, I first probably met him around the year 2000, I believe. He was already working on, you know, it was back then something that later became Dodgeball that he also sold to Google and now Foursquare. So he's been working on the same problem essentially for over 10 years now. Yeah. And why did it take off now? Why not then? Well, it's because of that UI, right? Because right now we can build stuff, you know, in his case, it's just one button, right? You check in, you tap it once, and and then it does all this magic for you. Yeah. And this, I believe strongly. So, you know, everything hinges on that design, on the UI. Interestingly, though, it's not designed, what I would say, in the limited kind of classic notion of design, where it's like you pretty something up, you make something look, you know, fun and attractive. For instance, for us, it's, you know, we do it with things like, I'm just going to show you the UI here of these icons. It's what we call Ditto shorthand. So, you know, trying to make it easy and fun for people to just tap away stuff. That's important, but really design it encompasses this whole use case here of, you know, how you actually, you know, if you look at things like Nokia, for instance, I used to work at Nokia. All of this stuff was innovated there, you know, over and over again, one would say, since like about 1995. Yeah. Yet it never took off because some of those crucial missing elements were not in place. Think about Flickr. Why did Flickr start, you know, gaining such a massive adoption around 2004, 2005? Well, it was because of the camera phones. It was what Steve Jobs called the chain of pain. In photographs, you had to take a picture on your digital camera, take a USB cable, attach it to your laptop, move the photo to your hard drive. Then you had to figure out some way of downloading some kind of software that lets you upload it back to the web if you wanted to share it with the cloud. And camera phones just made that a simple snap, right? Where, you know, and it would wirelessly go up to the cloud. And that's really what enabled Flickr to become Flickr. So oftentimes there's a series of these innovations in the underlying kind of technology stack that need to kind of be put in place before you get a Foursquare, before you actually can do a check-in, you know, before you get a Flickr where you can just, you know, kind of tap and share. And I think in the case of Ditto, interestingly, when we come back now, you know, close the loop back to these recommendations, this question of, you know, you think about Foursquare, and I think it's a beautiful loyalty game where it really rewards people for checking in at the same place over and over again. You know, you can become the mayor, you can get all these deals. You know, it's beautiful. It works wonderfully. I love it. But my interest is in the opposite, which is, you know, how do we enable you to discover places you've never been to before? That's right. Which is actually a much more difficult problem. And I think, you know, like you said, Foursquare is also noticing this is something that they're trying to address as well. Now, when you take that problem, one of the most interesting aspects I think we have right now is that there's a lot of APIs with structured data available out there. So if you notice, why can you just tap away on Ditto like this? Oh, it's because we're plugged into Facebook and Foursquare for some of that location information. So we can just serve you a list of places and ask you, are you at any one of these places? Or is this any of these places that you'd like to recommend back to Rob? We can do this for movies. You know, we can plug into a movie database like CinemaSource and get those movies back. Not just movies and places, we can now do it for all kinds of objects. Basically, almost any activity. Just give some examples, you know, books, right? So on Ditto, you have the option to say it's, you know, I'm reading a book, right? And what we're not doing yet, but what I think we want to do in the future, you see right there, is plug into something like the Amazon API or ebooks, which allows us to not just recommend back and forth books, but also tap it and start consuming it right away. And this is really what kind of makes me excited about why, when you ask why are you doing Ditto right now, is because a lot of this content is for the first time now becoming consumable on the device. So books are now available in ebook format. Music obviously available in digital format on places like radio, places like Spotify. And you can do this even for things like streaming movies with Amazon, with Netflix has an excellent API. And you can consume all the stuff on the device. So it's not limited just to location. I think it's what I call these social objects are pretty much all becoming immediately consumable on the device, which makes it that much more meaningful for people to talk about them, to recommend them back and forth to each other, because it's just one tap away and you can start watching it or consuming it.
It's so Jyri, it's so big what you're talking about. When you started down this path for Ditto, did you think that big, or did you think, listen, you know what, that the next step, like I think of a lot of entrepreneurs, think in grandiose terms. Definitely think about the big picture. We're going to be disruptive here, and disruptive takes a long time to build to become disruptive, like you've just identified with Foursquare. Like you found out with Jaiku and then Twitter. It takes a long time for these overnight successes. So when you set out to do Ditto, was it just literally like, look, check-ins, people are doing that. There's Foursquare, there's Gowalla, there's Yelp, there's blah blah blah, there's Footfeed, there's a whole bunch of other companies that are leveraging this, and now there's Facebook. We don't want to really be in that. What's that next piece that we can really own, that we can be the disruptor in that piece? Is that how you thought getting into that, or was it just literally like any object that is social? Like, I want to check into my car, I want to give you an opinion about a car, I want to book movie, even like a latte or a smoothie. You get down to that granular detail. Was that part of the vision when you set out, or was it really what's the next thing beyond the check-in?
Well, there's a strand of sociology called conversation analysis, which is the study of turn-taking in conversations. And I find that to be a wealth of ideas. And because essentially what these social interactions are kinds of conversations, right?
Yep.
And and this coupling of I want to ask something, I get back an answer, and then I confirm that it was thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yep.
It's great, it sucked. Is an example of this sort of a triplet. And then when you start thinking, well, how could I do something like this, which is a very simple interaction on a touch-based UI, without necessarily forcing people, because I have big hands, right? It's actually I don't enjoy typing on these devices. That's the kind of stuff that I would think about, because like my PhD still unfinished, dropped out. Nevertheless, was a critique of this guy Clay Christensen's theory of disruptive innovation, right?
I know Clayton very well. Yeah.
Right. So there you go. And Clay's main point in this, his idea is that the disruptive technology needs to be simpler, cheaper, or free people from going to an inconvenient place. As an example of the third criteria, you used to have to go to a Photoshop to get your photos developed, right? And digital cameras sort of made it possible for you not to have to do that. Now, or mobile phones, you no longer have
absolutely.
to find a phone.
Yeah.
So, so what I think about a lot is how can I create something that's simpler than Facebook, more fun than Twitter, and more useful than Foursquare. For instance, you kind of pick these straw men, and then you think about, well, if anybody right now wanted to create a successful social app, you kind of have to disrupt the incumbents in some way.
Yeah.
And this is the reason we're talking about this is obviously because this doesn't apply to Ditto. This applies to everybody out there who's thinking about this space right now. And I think the interesting part for me is to you know, when I find an itch that I can't scratch, you know, personally, like I was explaining how I went through these cycles with things like Jaiku and using these different services, and I found out that, gosh, there's really no great way for me right now to just, you know, let people know what I'm thinking about doing, because I don't like to make plans. I love things like Plancast, for instance, are great for saying like, oh, like next month I'm going to attend this conference. It's a plan, you know, I've got it set in my calendar. It's the traditional kind of planning. But then there's this much more ad hoc behavior that happens, especially, and I think you can see it in large cities, kind of where Foursquare started off from too, is where people are just kind of heading out the street and they haven't decided which wine bar they're going to go to yet. They're going to find out as they go along. It's part of the adventure, right? Yeah. And that's really social, because it means that you're probably looking at signals from the people around you. It's what I call social peripheral vision. And applications like Ditto try to give you that peripheral vision, yes, not into just where people are now, which is Foursquare, or where people were just a while ago, which is sort of more like the Facebook Flickr era of, yep, you know, you record, you take photos, you share them maybe a little bit later with your friends, yep, but about where people are going to be next, yes, which is much more about, you know, there's a classic Wayne Gretzky quote, you know, to the Canadian out there.
I don't think you need, I think that's part of our national anthem, right?
Right, well, you know, Finland's a big hockey country too,
absolutely,
but, you know, we don't have a, you know, Teemu Salame is not exactly known for the kind of quotes that Gretzky's known for. Yeah. Where he said, you know, it's all about not skating where the puck is, but where the puck is going to be, yeah, right? And this is what Ditto's trying to address, and I think that's the one big space that nobody owns yet.
No, and you know, I co-host a podcast called you know, This Week in Location-Based Marketing, and we talk about the predictive engines that everybody's coming up with, and mm-hmm, but that's really about predicting where you're going to be based on your history, right? So you'll know that I'm always going to be at the Starbucks around the corner because, you know, 4 out of 5 days during the week I go and pick something up there in the morning. That's predictive. And then, mm-hmm, can you reward me for being, you know, for your good prediction in my behavior? But what right, you're talking, what Ditto is disrupting behavior by sourcing where you should go based on you know, some recommendations from people around you. So, Jyri, how do you plan on making money out of this? I mean, that's the big question. You got some revenue models for this? How do you turn it into money?
That's a good question. So the honest answer is, I don't know. and you know, it's but I have some ideas, and I'll give you 2 examples. First is, when I was demoing the app, you saw that I was saying things like, I'm heading out for coffee. Yep. And I was getting back a list of the nearby coffee shops that also included, you know, some information about the ones that my friends had liked. Now, that's a classic. You can imagine this intent, you know, when you're posting about your intent, as kind of being like a Google search query. In that case, it was for local coffee shops, and we returned back a list of results, which there's an algorithm that tries to determine, you know, which ones are the most relevant for you based on things like, you know, low proximity in terms of geographical location, but also things like the signals from, you know, your friends possibly having starred some of them as their favorites. Now, you know, Google makes most of its revenue from search advertising. Yep. And so I don't see any reason why we couldn't use the same revenue model here by allowing a coffee shop to say, oh, you know, we've got a deal, and lift that up as a sponsored result. In fact, you can already see this on services like Foursquare. You can imagine doing things like deals, all the stuff that's kind of being played out in the mobile space right now, which is working to the advantage of a player like us because, you know, we're just looking to plug into the right, you know, whatever ad networks or what have you out there, you know, that can then offer that component for us when we're ready for it. So this is option number 1. There's another option too that's we already touched a little bit when I was talking about how all this content is becoming consumable on the devices. Yep. Which again is a well-known, well-tested solution that's available out there, which is, you know, when we allow you to recommend that movie or that Amazon ebook on the Kindle, that can then possibly lead to a purchase for which we can get affiliate revenue for.
Yeah.
So affiliate model, as well as this you know, kind of ads model, I think both are relevant in Ditto's case, because again, it's about you're trying to make up a decision, and I think it's useful for you to get information about, let's say, a deal before you've made up your decision. Or you know, if you get recommended a great book or a movie or possibly an artist, maybe a music album, you know, the ability for you to just tap that and make that purchase and start consuming it right there on your device. Again, it seems like it's completing the use case. It's not, you know, preventing you or obstructing you from doing something, which is the case with a lot of the traditional ways of, you know, companies trying to make money, is that they kind of flash something in your face that you don't like.
You know, what's amazing about this is that, you know, I talked about this before, about the original intent of a coupon, right? Like, so these things came out, you know, Coke was, I think, the first one to do a mass-produced coupon in the late 1800s. And the whole idea with the coupons, they flourished in the Depression in the 20s and 30s, and it was to get people off of their couches and into stores, right? It was a proactive mechanism to get people to go into stores. And if you actually got off your couch and, you know, walked down the street and went into a store and bought something, we'll give you a reward for getting off your couch and coming to our store. Right. I think what Foursquare and a lot of these guys have done is they've kind of bastardized what a coupon is by giving away basically profit margin when you're already in the store, right? So I check in, I get a 15% discount. My argument is, why? Why would you ever give somebody a discount when they're already in your store?
Right. Yeah.
It seems ludicrous.
I had a conversation with somebody about that just a couple of days ago, who was at a Toyota dealership here in San Francisco and queuing up, and noticed while queuing that there was a sign on the wall saying, you know, check in with Foursquare and get a $10 off of your service. And, you know, just kind of wondering about, like, what's the logic in that? So you're actually queuing already. So you're about to, you know, make this purchase.
Credit card in hand. Yeah.
Tell you. So, and as it turned out, the clerks at the counter hadn't even read that sign and were very confused about, you know, when she was trying to show them that her phone with a check-in. So, you know, I think what that speaks out to is, you know, and you see it in things. Why is Foursquare trying to kind of change their application into being more about recommendations, which I think is all fine and well. My question is, I love Foursquare for what it is, which for me is a check-in game. Yeah. It's just kind of the way it started, and where I think, you know, frankly, the founders are brilliant. Now, my concern is, like, will I enjoy Foursquare as much anymore if it gets, you know, pivoted into something else? Yeah. And I think that's a risk that I kind of also talked about when we talked about Facebook, and frankly also applies to services like Twitter, which I think is transforming into more of like a news service. At least for me, it's a channel for actually, you know, notice that I'm mostly tweeting links. Yes. Nowadays to whatever other social objects, New York Times articles, you know, maybe an article by Rob Woodbridge about, you know, something. So there you go again, where it's you know, kind of adding new functionality. In my view, always risks that you end up complicating the app, and that's a bad thing especially when you have a mobile application that really needs to be simple to work.
Well, and it does, and I think that's why, you know, something like Ditto, it really does bring that, you know, from a business model standpoint, you really can then start offering people an incentive, right? So if you're trying to find a coffee shop or a restaurant or something or a book, then you have an opportunity to incentivize somebody to go out and buy that. Get off the couch, get out of the house, go and buy that. And I love that concept. And I think even beyond that, I wanted to ask you about the virtual goods. You know, basically you get, you know, trophies. It would be interesting to see if that you turn those into revenues for the recommenders, right? So that if I'm active with Ditto, why wouldn't, you know, part of every transaction that I'm responsible for, I get a little piece of that, right? I know it's a nightmare from accounting, but you know, how do you give people incentive enough to continuously use the product over and over again, right? So that challenge, the marketing question is, you know, I have an iPhone. How do I get that from my last screen in a folder? How do I get Ditto from my last screen in a folder to my front screen and always being used? So how do you market this thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. So right now we're about 2 months old, and
Yeah, it's like 90 dog years, isn't it? Or 90 years in dog years. 2 months in the startup world?
we're gonna, right, start feeling very old very soon.
Yes.
That's not the case yet. I think there's different ways of doing this, right? There's the kind of color strategy, which is make a huge splash out initially and raise a lot of funding,
Yep.
and then use that money to improve your app. So I think can be a valid strategy. I think it can also be a trap. Now, there's another strategy, which is to kind of try to develop something organically that you just feel comfortable works, and it's a slower growth curve.
Yep.
But in my experience with even the companies that are household names now, Facebook, Foursquare, Twitter, all started off actually gaining traction fairly slowly initially. And I think when you're building potentially high value, potentially a fairly general social platform, it's not the same as building a strictly like a feature, for instance, like kind of like Instagram started off with, kind of just making one thing, like it's still Instagram. I love it. I use it every day, but it seems more like a feature to me, if you know what I'm saying, than a platform.
Absolutely.
And granted, there's probably examples of apps that have successfully pivoted into platforms after getting a lot of traction. But I do note that, like something like Ditto, to me, I'm sort of comfortable with a slower growth curve if we deliver value to those users, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with the strategy we have, which is, basically just grow it organically right now. And get on as many platforms as we can in terms of devices. So we're right now on the iPhone only. And actually, one of the things that, in addition to obviously Android and who knows, there could even be a new Windows phone platform out there pretty soon with a lot of distribution after the Nokia gets those handsets out.
Yeah.
We don't know yet. And of course the web. But what I was going to say is the tablet space is one of the most exciting parts of possibly for an app like Ditto, because what I noticed myself, after getting an iPad 2 was, first of all, I didn't really use the iPad 1 that much, but the iPad 2 is just that much better, that I use it a lot. And what I use it for mainly is two things, reading books and watching Netflix movies. So, and okay, I browse the web too, but that's really when I get out my iPad, it's usually I have one of those two things in mind.
Yep.
And both of those, so maybe there's another use case, what I'm trying to say here. In addition to the handheld mobile handset that we've really been talking about a lot here, which is about when you're out on the move, you're going somewhere. So locations seemed like a natural social object to begin with on Ditto.
Yep.
But as we expand and we're thinking about doing a tablet version of Ditto, maybe the things people are really into sharing are actually movies and books, for instance.
Or apps even, right?
Yeah, apps is another awesome one. Thanks for reminding me of that, because we actually see a bunch of conversations on Ditto already about people soliciting for information about apps. And I think that's happening on Twitter and Facebook a lot right now. And there isn't really a great platform that would allow you to just, you just want to link to it and download it immediately. So.
And getting recommendations from your friends for those kind of things, it's a personal choice. And there are a whole bunch of companies that are doing this for, exploring apps or finding apps because there's so many of them, but nothing like this. Like, I don't want to join another network to be able to, start building new contacts so that they can, and creating relationships so they can tell me what I like. I want to just leverage the guys that I already know. And I think that's what the beauty of Ditto. Beyond that. So when you look a little bit forward, you've got a mobile device, you've got location, you've got objects, tablets, books, movies, apps. How far does this extend, and where do you guys want to take this industry going forward? Is this a platform, or is this a feature of a bigger product?
Yeah, I think in my mind, Ditto is a platform because we can dynamically keep adding other social objects to the play.
Yeah.
It's actually something that we built into the system, into the technology that doesn't require us to push out a new update of the app necessarily. We can kind of change around we have these buttons, these icons that represent activities that you can do now. So in my world, it's now a business of, first of all, getting that interaction pattern right so that people actually find it fun and useful, where I think we still have a bunch of work to do.
Yep.
As well as, then expanding to get to hit the right social objects. Is it going to be that apps is really the thing that takes off on this sharing platform, or is it going to be something like, I don't know, music? We don't know yet.
Even books. I just think that the combination of all those, you're going to tap into such a large market, anyways. That something, or the combination of all of those, will push it over the edge into to that tipping point. And when you so this is a platform, easy to integrate new things, easy to just continuously add new objects to this. And then do you start opening this up? Do you start opening the API up? Do you start looking at analytics and actually getting into predictive? Like, if you liked this movie, you'll like this movie. Just kind of automating that predictive nature of it. Do you get into that space, or do you not think about that in the short term?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. That my hunch here is that there are certain classic algorithmically achievable things, such as people who favorited this movie also favorited, and so on, that you can actually get from other recommendation platforms right now, like Netflix or things like Hunch.
Yep.
And what I'm more interested in is getting the conversation to happen on Ditto.
Yeah.
Getting the social interaction, because that's what I believe in the end kind of, is the glue that connects people. Not, you kind of get addicted to Twitter or Facebook not because of, the wonderful, UI or design or the machinery behind it, but because it's the people who are on it.
Yep.
And who you can connect with. So that's kind of where I believe the end game is. It's not in the technology. It's in getting that right social interaction to take place there, so that it kind of keeps attracting you back. And I think we've started the journey there now. And to be perfectly frank with you, I think it's very risky. Right now, there's so much. There's an inflation of apps out there, and the incumbents are so strong that it's very difficult for a new social app, a new social platform to break through in a massive way. But, on the other hand, when people are chanting the incumbent's name, that's the right time to start building the next big thing.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree with you more. When that starts to happen, there's big opportunity to find the holes that are being left behind from those guys. I interviewed Mike Brezina, who's the founder of Postagram, which leverages Instagram's technology to do print and postcards from that. And he said the same thing, while Instagram rises, we're going to rise with them, but it's not going to preclude us from building a different business and not being tied to those guys. And he just found a hole and filled it. And I love that.
Right.
So your goal for marketing this is really viral marketing or use case marketing. So I use it. I'm going to help. Somebody else is going to find out that I'm using it, and you grow it that way. Are you doing any outbound at all, or is it just really about engaging and social use?
Well, for now, I think for us, it's really about getting that use case right.
Yeah.
And then So one of the biggest vectors right now of influencing application growth is actually the app stores themselves.
Yeah.
So getting featured on the App Store, obviously there's way to also kind of artificially pump that up by using ad networks and things like that. But also just getting distribution on the different platforms, frankly, can be a huge deal. Android market. Yep. All those other App Store markets. So I think that's probably one of the strongest forces right now that that I think we're going to leverage as much as we can. And then on the other hand, there's another way of going through this, which is kind of what was in Tim O'Reilly's original thesis on Web 2.0. At least what I took from those. That was a long time ago. I wonder if you even remember those anymore.
Of course.
Which was that part of becoming a platform is getting other people to, build businesses on top of you, basically. Yeah. So if there are ways for us to partner, and I think in case of Foursquare, for instance, it was the local businesses that actually started distributing Foursquare. At least, I heard Dennis once mention this, that, it was really what ignited Foursquare's rapid, growth, or that phase of their growth at one point was when the local businesses actively started promoting Foursquare check-ins to their customers.
Yeah, when they put stickers on their windows, that's a big thing.
Yeah, so suddenly you have a completely new vector. You have somebody working for you, doing your marketing for you for free.
Yeah. So that's how you do it.
So for Ditto, I think, that's the cost-effective, that's the real viral way of doing it. And so in many cases, like, we talk about virality, right? And it's the assumption is always that it's the users inviting each other to the service or sharing a link to a viral YouTube video or whatever, which is obviously a part of it. But there's also this other part, which is getting people who, whether it be, I don't know, like in Etsy's case, the crafts sellers, then marketing it to their customers, yeah. Which essentially means, in classic business language, partnerships. Yep. So that's another way we could, imagine growing the service by partnering up with somebody who, does something around movies, does something around books, does something around places, and then wants to use Ditto to market themselves.
All of these tools that other companies should be leveraging, it's amazing, right? I often talk, when I talk to, companies that I help move into the mobile space, I say, don't build an app. You need a mobile website, I think, for certain reasons, but don't build an app. Go out and, be a part of the Yellow Pages or be a part of all these little applications like Foursquare that allow you to do this for free. But you're helping promote them, so there's a benefit. So here's another perfect example. Ditto is another perfect example of an application that everybody, every mom and pop shop, it's no cost. They can get involved right away. They can leverage this to their heart's content, and it's spreading your word, and it's allowing them to play in mobile without a cost, right?
Yes. Yes.
So that's what I love about this industry is that you guys are building an infrastructure for other companies, terrestrial companies, real companies that have bricks and mortars, and even authors, I think, to allow them to leverage what you're doing to their benefit. And why wouldn't everybody just jump on this?
Yeah, well, there you go. So it's a question of once you hit that virtuous cycle. Yeah. There's no stopping it.
Well, it's a great thought. And so. Last question, do you disclose numbers? Do you disclose the number of people that have downloaded it over this period of time? You've only been around for a couple of months, but are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, we've been around for about 2 months, like I said, and we're getting we're at about 10,000 downloads a week is what we've been doing.
That's great.
So, we're pretty comfortable with it, and I think that it's going to grow as we launch on Android.
Yeah. Is that imminent, or are you working on that now, or are you?
Yeah, we're working on that now. We're a small team. We're just 3 guys actively in developing, and then we partner up with get some of our icons are designed by a graphic designer in Finland, and we got a few contractors who we collaborate with. But we're also I think at a point right now where we've kind of proven the first concept that's, I like it. I think it seems to be having an effect. Yep. And now it's time to take it to the next level.
Last question, Jyri. I'm Canadian. There's a small company up here called Research in Motion. They build the BlackBerry and the Playbook. Some people say that every time I mention RIM, there should be like taps being played in the background for their death. Is that something, do you look at that market as well, or is this really a 2-horse race, and the 2 horses are right now iOS and Android?
Well, the classic answer is that competition is always good.
Yes.
I think the problem in
when building platforms to develop on is that the more platforms you have out there, the more difficult it gets for, it's similar to Europe versus the US. When you have a place like the United States, which is one language and one market, scaling up is that much easier. But when you have a fragmented market with different languages, different countries to develop for, when you have the same going for mobile platforms, that just makes it that much more difficult for apps to scale.
Absolutely.
So ideally, what I'd see happen is all of this stuff move to happen over a commonly shared standard language, such as HTML5. Yeah. And that way, and then oh yes, it would be wonderful to have RIM.
Every device covered.
Yeah, as long as it's easy for us application developers to distribute our applications, and for our users, to have a choice also over what device they choose to use, I think that's great. However, that's not the way the world is right now. We still need to develop for all these different platforms. So that's the way I look at it. I wish RIM well. I want them to succeed, but I want these players in the industry to collaborate to enable everybody to grow, rather than fighting each other by creating incompatible platforms that just make life more difficult for developers.
That's a good point, and I know there's a lot of viewers that come from RIM, obviously all the platforms. So if you're listening, it's a common theme across this, and it's time to start listening a little deeper to what the development community is talking about. Mm-hmm. Now I've monopolized your whole morning. It's been beautiful. All I can see is the sunshine streaming in behind you, and I hear the birds floating. And
oh yeah, here you go.
Look at that. For those of you who are just listening, you're missing a glorious San Francisco morning. So I'll let you get outside and out to enjoying San Francisco. Jyri, where do people find out about? You said it ditto.me, ditto.me.
Yes.
They can download it currently in the App Store.
Yeah, for the iPhone. That's correct.
iPhone. So you're still working on the Android, so ditto.me, the App Store, and soon at some point on Android. Certainly, there's a web component to this as well. They can use it online at ditto.me.
Yeah.
Anywhere else? Is that it?
That's it for now. Okay. Stay tuned.
That's great. Well, listen, Jyri, I can't thank you enough for spending some of your morning with us and talking about this. It's been very open and candid conversation about what you guys are doing at Ditto and Me. I want to follow you guys and make sure that as you progress, I'd love to have you back on and see how things are going and see what the original vision was versus the outcome at the end, and see how this actually works. We'll document it a little bit if you're okay with that.
Absolutely, Ron.
So I've been speaking with Jyri Engeström, who is the co-founder of Ditto.me, a former co-founder of Jaiku, and all around. Can't wait to see how things progress with what you guys are doing. Thank you, Jyri.
Thanks a lot. Good being on.
Guys who's still watching this, I know that there are lots of you who are still watching this or listening to this. Really appreciate you sticking around. These are the lessons that you should be learning. These are the lessons. Take what you can from them and leverage for your own business. And if you do, flip me a note, untether@gmail.com. Love to hear from you. And go and download Ditto from the App Store. I'd appreciate it, and so would Jyri.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Jyri.
Cheers.